Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. We probably have a few people that may be coming in just a little bit late. And first of all, are there any questions from the first session? Anything that anybody wants to maybe have clarified or? Yes, sir.
It's always me, isn't it? Did you treat people or if they go through the program and they decide, are there people that come out the other end and are okay with drinking socially?
It's something we discourage very, very strongly. People are going to do what they're going to do. Like I said this morning, in my experience, those who start out thinking that they can drink socially don't do very well at all. That is the biggest part of the people that come back to us again. If there are some that drink socially and are doing it well, I don't really know about them, especially not if that was their substance of choice to start with.
I can think of one guest particular, because I was the transitional care coordinator for nearly 3 years, so I was the person that would stay in touch with the guests once they went home. And one guest that came in for something that had nothing to do with alcohol. And so he continues to drink, but he says, I didn't come in there for that. I came in for this heroin, whatever it happened to be, and that was his rationale. Again, it's certainly not recommended, but
It's walking a very fine line. It's so easy to change from one addiction to another.
My experience has been that people refer to themselves as alcoholics and addicts because for a few reasons. It's the surrendering. One of the times when I started shifting at least towards being clean and sober, I had this image of a boxing ring. And Mike Tyson was in it, only he was even bigger. And he was my addiction and a particular drug of choice, kind of represent. And every time, because I would sometimes get clean and sober for on my own, white knuckle it for several days or a week, I think a month once, over a 30, almost 40-year period. And I would get in that ring, and sure as hell, if I went in that ring with Mike Tyson, professional boxer, the imaginary twice the size, he would kick the crap out of me eventually. Sometimes it would be like, a week would be okay, a month, and then it was the drugs and alcohol. They're not just for breakfast anymore. You could have them all day. And but I've heard very prominent three principles people speak publicly and in webinars going how they think it's that people should call, and Sid Banks, which I think is out of context, even when I hear it myself. That somebody walks up to them, Sid Banks in a prison, and says, "Hey, I'm an alcoholic." And he goes, "Why would you call yourself that?" So I just had a little, like thorn in my side about the whole calling yourself an alcoholic is a way of surrendering, and it's a way of reminding yourself that generally, if I drink, it leads to problems. And then I hear people that talk about, well, I know somebody, they don't label themselves an addict, they don't call themselves an addict, and they've overcome heroin addiction. I could go on, this is a subject that could go too long, but how do you feel about labeling yourself an addict or an alcoholic?
I hate labels of any kind, not just with addiction. I'm a mental health therapist. I hate the labels of depressed. I hate the labels of schizophrenia. I hate the labels of bipolar. We had a young woman that came into the center and she was determined that she was bipolar. And I actually pulled out the DSM-4, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Health Disorders. And I sat there and went down the list. And I said, prove to me that you have this label. The thing about, and she couldn't. There was no way that young woman had that diagnosis. The mental health profession is so inexact with labels, diagnoses. It's the best way that the mental health profession can try to put people's problems into categories, but it's very, very inexact. We can't take a blood test and send it off to a lab and have it come back and say, yeah, this person has schizophrenia or this person has whatever. We can't do that. We can't take an x-ray and see it. We have to go by what the person tells us when they come into our office and what we hear. And either one of those things has a lot of variables going on. What if when the person comes into my office, they're in a really, really crappy mood? And they tell me how awful their life is that day. And what if I'm in a crappy mood too? And so I'm at a low level and I'm hearing, oh God, this person is, they're near suicidal here. We've got to get them labeled. But the next day the person could be in a much better mood when they come to talk to me. I could be in a better place and hear something completely different. It's an inexact science. And the problem that I have is that people live up to those labels. They buy them. If a doctor or a mental health professional puts that label on their head, they own it and they live up to it. So I want the label pulled away. I don't want anybody thinking they're anything other than a human being that is okay. Yeah, you might have an issue with alcohol. You're basically allergic to alcohol. Every time you get around it, you're going to end up in trouble. But I don't see to me, the label would not be healthy. If it's healthy for you, do it. I can't be an expert on you, but that's how I feel about putting labels on people.
Another thing is just pointing it back to them, and you have to decide, why is it important to you to feel like that you need to switch to another drug? Is that, is that still the happiness you're seeking, the relief, whatever, what's it to you? And that's what you have to decide. We certainly can't decide it, for anybody. And so, yeah, absolutely pointing it to them. And just kind of touch base on what Debbie said, about holding on to the labels. Yeah, we have people that come in, and I mean, it's like a, precious baby, don't touch this. That's who I am. And, it takes a lot of work. I say a lot of work, but most of the time it takes a little bit of work to help a person understand that maybe that's not who they are. Maybe they're a lot more than that, And, but they've been told that for a really long time, and they believe it, and they've actually wrapped their life story, around that label. So
it just makes it difficult to go into a 12-step meeting and say I'm a human being. It's taken as it's found. I don't. As I'm just thinking this, it's offensive to a lot of people.
You ever tried? You ever gone into an AA meeting and said, "Hi, my name is Kristen, I'm a human being"?
No, but I will do that and report back to you because I've been with these people a long
I
time.
had two other hands up. I'm not sure who was first. There was Jackie and Kat.
I just wanted to respond to that because I went through that little crisis of conscience for a while. And again, I'm speaking from what is okay for me, and it may not be what's okay for you. But any label that I had before my understanding of the principles was purely based in ego, and I used it in service of that. So I was revolving door in and out of the rooms of 12-step meetings. And I said, I am an addict and I'm powerless. So watch me go back out and prove it to you. Over and over and over again. And I wore that like a shield. And when I first learned the principles, I wore my absence of a label in the same way. So my initial desire was to walk into a 12-step meeting where I don't even have to identify myself at all if I don't want to. But where everyone was saying, hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm an addict, hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm an addict, I wanted to say, I'm Kat and I have a deeper understanding than all of you. I'm simply a human being. And that's ego too, for me. That's where my desire to not identify lay. So I choose to in that context, but as a way to say me too, not as a way to identify myself, if that makes sense. It's a label that I'm okay with picking up and trying on, because I don't feel the need to be different from in that context, but it's not something that I carry with me. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
It makes sense to me. So I was going to answer Chris too, and you demonstrated it in that you know when something's coming from the ego and when it's coming from health. And so when the people come and they say, well, you know, can I socially drink, or I need to get off my meds, you know that's coming from ego or from insecurity or from some other place that help. They know, and you know. And then you hear within yourself, I don't want to identify myself like that anymore. It's coming from a different place, it feels differently, then you don't do it. So if it works, if it's helpful, do it until it is, you know, there's no rules, are there?
Good. I love this. It was a great conversation. We promised you too that we wouldn't be speaking all the time, that we're going to have some others join us. And so, Colin, will you come up and join us here? Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Colin, and before I get started, I just want to send out a personal thank you to Debbie, Barnett, Leona, Kit, and Tris and my GBR family. I'm a graduate of College Breeze Recovery. I graduated back on actually July 4th, Independence Day, so it's a big day I'll always remember, of this year. So I'm newer to the principles. It's been 6 months since I've been introduced. And I wanted to speak to you guys today because it saved my life, 3 principles, or in any sense of the life that I had. And so I wanted to share, where I was before and where I am now with that. To get started with it, I'd say, going back to my childhood, I was always a very happy kid. I was always the one smiling. I was always very happy and very excited to live. I loved people, loved my family very, very much. However, at a young age, I realized that there was something a bit different than me than other kids, and the fact that I was gay. And I started to understand that at a very young age. I was very aware that the way that I was feeling towards the world was different than other people. But when you're a kid, it's difficult to understand that. So in that, I share because one of the characteristics that I always had was a level of observer to life. Even as a young kid, I would go inward a lot. And so as I started to grow up and started to get bullied, and so I kind of go through that and start to feel like this pressure from the outside world, and fear and anxiety towards that, I just kept kind of going more inward, and I would focus on other people. How do I size myself up to others? How do I protect myself in these situations? Because I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a Catholic home where it wasn't accepted. My religion told me that I wasn't accepted by classmates and everything else. So the reason I share that is because it speaks to the moment that my life kind of turned dark. And it was around my preteen age, and my parents actually came across some not so great dirty photos, and mortifyingly so, printed them off, put them in a manila folder. So I now have a fear of manila folders for the rest of my life. And sat me down for a conversation that, frankly, I wasn't ready to have. And my mom, who I'm very, very close with, she was always the person that, no matter what was going on in the outside world, I always had my mother. So there was a comfort in that for me. There was I felt strong in that, that I always had my mother and my family. So this conversation plays out, and at this point, I'm able to deduct where it's going and what they're asking. And my mother, just being human, and I know now out of concern, but then she said, because if you are gay, we can go talk to a priest. And that's the moment that my life went dark. And I took that as that I was unlovable, that there was something wrong in their eyes, not necessarily mine. But it was a moment that I turned off from my family. So what was difficult for my family now, as we've had these difficult conversations, and thanks to GBR, is this was around my teenage years. So I started to drink and to do drugs. I started with just weed in high school. But even myself, I didn't know what I was really doing. And what I was doing, I was starting to numb at a young age. A lot of fear, a lot of anger. And I was just pushing it aside. I remember that conversation planning out my life until I got to college. I was like, well, if this is the case, I'm going to get myself to college. And I'll figure it out then. So it was always like wearing a mask in front of everyone until I felt that I could be safe. So it did start off in that sense innocently. But then I get to college and, still partying with everyone. And then that's when I was introduced to cocaine and harder drugs. And, well, this is fun. I can be myself. And so I came out in college and kind of found my own niche and my own friends. But then still had these deep, deep issues that I wasn't paying attention to. And so, I had this kind of divide with my family. I had kind of two separate lives. I wanted to be close to them. I loved them, but they don't love me. So it was just very complicated. And so I just kept drinking. And, I think some of you might already know in your personal lives, at some point, that's no longer acceptable. You're not in college anymore at 22, 23 to, get this blackout drunk. It's now getting in the way of my career, getting in the way of my everyday life. And so I'm also looking for happiness just all inside of myself. Well, if I'm not happy here in Florida, I'm going to move to San Francisco. So I moved to San Francisco. I'm going to be in this gay mecca, everybody loves me. And then I'm introduced there to the mollies and then crystal meth. And so when I was introduced to that, I only did it a couple times, but there was this effect that it had, this numbing. I just didn't feel anything, and I loved it. I was like, oh, this is how people are. Everyone else in my life seemed to have everything figured out. So I didn't really touch it then until I got to, I moved from San Francisco when things weren't working out to Chicago. And what I see now is that my entire life I was just not paying attention to some deep emotional issues, pain that I just couldn't face with my family. I couldn't talk to my parents. It just didn't. My ego, my life, 12 years old became my ego life. It's this alter ego, and then you're gonna be this, you're gonna be this, and you are this, you are that. And I started to lose that. I started drinking heavily, and one thing led to another. I was looking for happiness in relationships, and especially for those of us in the LGBTQ community, I think a lot of us deal with these emotional issues. We were all told, not all, but a lot, that from society to our religions, that we're unlovable, that we are wrong. So take that into my reality of trying to find a partner, and we can't even show up to the same conversation because we don't love ourselves. So if things start to go wrong, it's a lot easier to put up a wall, push that person aside, and move on. So I finally did meet someone that changed my life in a lot of great ways, but also wrong ways. He's kind of like my partner in crime and my boyfriend. And when that relationship ended, it's hard to explain. And I know it's a human emotion, but it was like this deep, deep pain in my gut and my heart. And now looking back, it's because it reminded me of what happened to me as a kid when everyone left me, or I felt left. So to deal with that, I was in my fourth job in my 20s. I was not able to figure anything out. And I couldn't go to work like this, and I was drinking heavily, so I couldn't function with that. So I ended up in a situation where I smoked crystal meth again and numbed it all. And so, I can go to work, I can be productive, I can do all these things. And drugs are huge within my own community. I mean, we have our own subculture within societies, the gay culture, that is ravished with alcohol, ravished with drugs, because, you know, we're kind of like, it's the outskirts, we're on the outside, you know, noting. And so that turned quickly against my favor. I lost my job, and just like my social circles and circumstances were just getting out of control. So this year, I just finally fessed up to my mom, and I told her that I was using, and I don't think they even knew what to do at the time. I had a DUI when I was younger, in my 20s, that had introduced me to the 12-step program. And even, I think for me, and it was hitting my ego, but also I think now looking back, hitting my divine side, was for someone to tell me that I had a disease, or that I was, just didn't hit with me. That wasn't what I was dealing with, or that wasn't who I was or who I am. So when my parents looked for a recovery program, they came across Gulf Breeze Recovery, and the holistic healing approach is what drew them, knowing me as well, that this might be something you go for. So I'm very thankful now that my father came up to Chicago, all like ready to have the talk and intervention, like ready for me to like storm out the door, and I was ready. And
Can I say something? If my memory is correct, I think he was on the phone with us right before he knocked on the door.
that's
You got a place right down the
He goes,
street.
yeah, I'm here
Staked
right now.
out where you were sitting.
Hey, are you serious?
100%.
Like, this is so my dad. He's like 10 steps ahead all the time. So my dad shows up and has a conversation. So I get to GBR, and I'm mad again. I'm like, how am I here? Who am I? Because like at this point, I'm like, at that point, like I was pushed away from even my gay community. I wasn't even a gay guy. Like everyone was pushing me away because I was drug user. So I'm like, who am I and what am I? And I was really mad at my family. And I remember this gentleman who used to work there, Reed. Right before I came, my dad was. I tried to do that one, like, get out of it. And I called Reed, and I was like, I don't know if I should trust my father. And this was the kid, or my ego. I don't know if I trust my dad with this. This is freaking me out. How can I trust him when they left me with a kid? And all he said was, that's why you're coming. And, like, it made no sense, but it made, like, all the sense to me. And I was like, okay. So I got to GBR, and I was so thankful. What they spoke about in the first leg of this that I think is so important for anyone that's dealing with addictions is compassion. I've never met such kind individuals as the staff at Gulf Breeze Recovery. Everyone was just so nice, and they didn't judge me, and they didn't, label me any of these things, and they allowed me to use my own wisdom to find my own path. So when the principles were given to me, I'd already kind of started on my own little spiritual path, and I apply it my own way. Realizing that what had happened to me as a kid was I followed a thought after my mom said that statement, that this means she doesn't love me. Like, it just, when I had my aha moment, it did like a flash, like you were talking about, like a flash forward of just my entire life from 13 till now at 30. And I was just like, everything's been an illusion. Like, I've had this illusion of what, and my parents have been trying to show up, and I'm not listening to them. And it was just incredible. So that's why it was really important that I came in here and like supported you guys, and because you gave me my life back, and the 3 principles did too. So I want to thank you all too, because the work that we're all doing is changing lives and saved mine. So thank you.
Somebody have a question? A comment?
I think Carlin gave us the phone line back.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I had told him. The applause was going on, but I told him, I said, they just pointed the path, you took it.
Right. I mean, I think we're all sort of conduits for each other, but you can't make somebody give their own life back. I mean, so the applause is for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right now, we'd like for you to hear from a family perspective, a little bit about what goes on in a family when they're dealing with
Wow. And I just have to come and give you a hug when you said that. Seriously, I mean, it's like, I don't even know if I can.
This is Joe Fire. Joe and I have quite the history. I may have told some of you that she and I started our 3 principal journey together, in 01.
I think it's around 2000, 2001.
I moved in 2001. I think you guys are, it's older.
The 90s?
You're
Are you
older.
saying that we're old?
Just trying to make us older than we are.
It's a lot.
Anyway, it was a long time ago. And so we went that journey for a while. We had the fun of getting to work together and put our new skills to practice. And then later on, we went different directions, but we've always stayed pretty close. So.
Yeah, that's been quite a journey. I will say, quite a journey. Always hated it when I came to these things and people would just sit here for a minute. It's like, I gotta sit here just for a minute. We did the resiliency workshop earlier this morning, and I think her name is Jean or Jean Ann, I'm sorry, I don't know. Jean talked about a dog and a ball and how the dog gets obsessed. And I have to say, from a parental perspective, from this weekend, I have learned that I'm the dog and the ball, and John was my ball. That was my obsession. Excuse me. We did the first training way back when, and I told Debbie that day, this is what John needs. Now, John is 33 today, 25th. He's had an interesting journey because, as you said, he's different. He's not gay, but he's different. When he was 2, I went to the pediatrician and I said, I'm not sure I'm cut out to be the mother of this child. And I mean, I went without him, I went without my husband, everybody. And I said, I am not sure this is for me. And he told me it was too late. That I kind of needed to buck up and take care of this. You know what I mean? And I was like, well, he doesn't do anything that I thought he would do. We came home from the hospital and he's not slept since, ever. So it's like there's these things. And so, but that was my first realization of like, there's more to this motherhood thing than meets the eye. We have, as you described, my husband is phenomenal. John had two full sets of grandparents that thought he hung the moon. He had full household community support. I mean, the 40 developmental assets, he had 42. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't know. But he was different. He's a different thinker. So when he started school, first grade, they identified him as different. Well, how isn't that interesting? That he was gifted, So I was like, okay, what do you do with this? This is great. It's not like I didn't know this already from the words he was using when he was 1, And so they sent us for a series of tests and testing and placement and enrichment and on and on and on and on. And through this process, you have to see a lot of psychologists and things like that. And so this was 2nd grade now. We're moving forward. And the result of that test, he sat me down at the desk again without my family, without my children. He said, Mrs. Byer, there's a lot of different things in the world. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, he draws this little graph. And he says, there's a very, very, very fine line between genius and insanity. And he said, your son is right here. And I'm like, great. Great. Isn't that special? So I say all that because I understood where the child was coming from. Where you and I see black and white, or his teachers would see black and white or X and Y. He sees the full array and every axis that you can even comprehend. By the time he was 8, he was wiring the house, rewiring the house, telling Don that the circuit was wrong. It was a simple circuit. What is wrong with you? That kind of thing. So it's like the challenges were there. And so you can imagine through grade school, middle school, and high school, well, I'll get to high school in a minute, but he was actually, and I don't mean this, if anyone is a teacher, I do not mean this in a derogatory way whatsoever, but he was smarter than the teachers, and he could figure out things really well. Let me just say that. You know, he would work out, everything from going to the clinic and calling his papa to play Wheel of Fortune in the morning from the clinic and nobody knew it, to, you know, like I said, electrical circuitry. So, you know, I don't know. So it's difficult to find friends when your mind is that sort of mind. Of course, we had a lot of kids that came to the house, they play, blah, 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 blah. The short of it is, if you couldn't put Legos together in the fashion that he could put Legos together, which would be an entire city and a train and a town, and, you know, he just couldn't even stand it. It was just, the frustration was just too great. So we go forward in 6th grade. He decided he no longer was going to show his math. You know, every single solitary day I would get the call, Mrs. Byer, this is Bill. Yes, you know, the principal, so and so. So in 6th grade, he decided he no longer needed to show his math because he knew it. They knew he knew it, and he wasn't going to waste his time. And so I was like, please just humor him. You know, and it's like, why would I do that? They know I know it. I'm not wasting my time. You know, and so the principal calls and I get this call. And he says, Mrs. Byer, this time he tells me, John just needs to learn to conform. Those are the wrong words to say. Wrong words to say. So I went ballistic. And I thought, I am so bad that I'm not even going to do anything. So I went home and I thought, 3 days took me to calm down, 3 days. And I called the board office, the school board office, and I said, I don't want any action. I want you to take down my statement and I want you to put it in this man's file. So when the next parent calls or another complaint comes, excuse me, that you will have a file. 15 minutes after I hung up that phone, I got a call where he was falling all over himself and apologizing and so on and so on and so on. And I'm like, really? You know, now it's good. Now he can be creative. You know, no. So anyway, I say all that to say, I didn't realize at the time, and this is probably, you know, you might, you sound so familiar, you know. I believe that from that day and when he was 2, my quest began. My quest began because I didn't know what to do with his phenomenal gift that I had been given. And so when Debbie and I hit 2000, I guess, I told Debbie, this is it. Perfect, I finally found it. The quest is over, you know. And so I started talking to my family and about principles and things like that, and they're like, yeah, that's good. That's good. You know? And they're like, we need 2 rooms in the house. But over time, you know, of course, we do practice what we preach. I think everybody in here does. If you come from a place of love and a place from the principles of where you do truly believe that you are a healthy individual and that you're a positive individual and so on, you know, it comes to you, but it's in time. And so we fast forward. So he's in high school. Again, it's the same with the math. I don't know why he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. The teacher says, if you think you can do it better, come up. And he taught math for 3 days. You know what I mean? It's like, you just go crazy. But I think that's what directed him. Just as you said, you felt like you were different. He felt like he was different. He recognized he was different. And he couldn't have the relationships that most kids are developing at that time, you know, through sports or whatever, you know, that sort of thing. And so I think he tells me that he was 9 when he started to drink. And I'm not sure that I believe it. You know what I mean? I have a real hard time grasping that. My house didn't have alcohol. My mom and dad's house didn't have alcohol. Don's mom and dad's had alcohol, but it would be like a glass of wine with dinner. It wasn't like, let's sit down and just kick back as much as we can. You know what I mean? So it's like those influencers weren't really there. So I'm not sure, even if he was 9 years old, I'm not even sure where it came from. But then again, he's extremely resourceful. Extremely resourceful. So, you know, I don't know. But so this has begun, or this, as you said, this path has begun, and he stuck predominantly with alcohol. I don't know that there were other things mixed in. He's told me just about everything in his life, and sometimes I ask him not to tell me, but he's never mentioned that. You know what I mean? And he's always said that wasn't a factor. But, so he had gotten through life with alcohol, and it was great amounts of alcohol. And as the years go, I think everybody in here, I think you mentioned, gets to where the alcohol is really not good enough, so you go somewhere else and you add something, or you do whatever. And so we have 2 houses that are side by side, and he was living in the one beside of us temporarily with his soon-to-be wife, blah, blah, blah. And it didn't really occur to me what he was drinking until I saw it. You know what I mean? We're there every day, and I'm like, God, that's a 30-pack, and did you not just buy a 30-pack? That kind of thing. So, and then I just noticed that he was more and more. And so we had the conversation. There's alcoholism in my family, not my family, immediate family, but my mother's family. And I said, you're predisposed to this gene anyway, so I'm not sure this is what you want to continue, or you're going to be on that path that takes you down. And so after much conversation, we talked, and we went to the emergency room to try to seek help for alcoholism in Charleston, West Virginia. I can't talk about it or I'll fall to pieces. I have never had a more horrible experience in my life. Horrible. Let me say it one more time, horrible. We left the emergency room. The doctor was, and he said, you do know he could die from this, right? And I was like, why are you telling me this, and why are you letting me go if this is what's going to happen when he detoxes? Because they were letting me take him home to detox, and with nothing, no tools, no nothing. And so I said, no, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So I stopped on the way home, and I buy myself a blood pressure cuff. It's like, no, I have no idea. I'm a medical background, but I was like, okay, we're going to do this. So you call in each day to the local hospital, Highland Hospital, and then if they open up a spot, you can come. If they don't, you're screwed. So every day for 2 weeks, after we did the puking and the shaking and the whole, holding hands and crying and the whole thing, they said, well, we have a bed. I was like, hallelujah, hallelujah. Don and I take poor little John, we load him up, we go down there. It's not in the hospital. You have to go behind the hospital. You go behind the hospital to a chain link fence with a lock on it. And I'm like, what is this place? This is like barbaric. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking, I was looking at Don was looking at me. We were all thinking, oh, heck no, And the lady comes out, she looks at him like this. You have to know, John, he's taller than I am, slender, did not have long hair. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. She said, are you a boy or a girl? And I'm like, that's it. Goodbye. Thank you. We're out. We're done. And we left. And I thought, how degrading, humiliating, all of the things that you can even, to take a bad situation and make it horribly worse. So I want to fast forward now. He's gone, and he's still continuing to drink. I'm now learning the amounts, and they're horrifying me, and I'm more worried. And then I had a conversation with him, and I said, the only thing I can tell you is I love you. It's unconditional. You know that Don and I are here for no matter what. If you want help, we're here. If you don't want help, we're here. That's all I can say. I wish you wouldn't do this, but I can't. After that episode, I was like, I would never do that to another human being as long as I live. That was horrible. And so things progressed, and he's now married, and his wife is lovely. She's wonderful. They've moved to Oregon, which is out in God's country, which is phenomenal. And she calls me one day in a panic. She said, I think he's losing it. And I said, excuse me? And she said, he's running around the backyard. He's screaming. He's crying. She said, I don't know what to do. And I said, I'm in West Virginia. I have no idea. Do you need an ambulance? Do you need what do you need? I'll get whatever you need, And she said, just, I'll call you back. Well, she didn't call me back until the next day. So the next day we talked, and I talked to John, and I talked to her, and all these things. And he said he just couldn't do it anymore. He said he couldn't do it anymore. He said he was at wit's end. He had tried to self-medicate, had tried to do it, and he said he couldn't do it. And at this point, I sort of panicked, because it doesn't matter how bad his day would be. He always had a twinkle in his eye, and he's always positive, and he's always more worried about the person beside of him than him. Always. Has been that way since he was tiny. And I thought, well, he's lost his spark. You know what I mean? And we're in some deep doo-doo here, because the spark is gone. And so I thought, okay. And I sat there and, you know how you get your little epiphanies, have my little epiphany. I thought, wait a minute, I need to call Golf Breeze. You know what I mean? It's like, damn, why didn't I think of Debbie? You know, and so I called Reed and I called Debbie and I said, I'm just asking because I'm not a person of means. We are by no means wealthy. And in my mind, when I think of 8 weeks of treatment, I think of hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I'm sorry, I don't have, and he didn't have insurance. And so it's like, I don't know if it's possible, but this is where I am. Something's going to have to give. And I called, and when Reed told me some of the ways that things work, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to work. You know, this is going to work. I said, I can do this. And then I thought, wait a minute, it's not me. I'm not going in there. You know, it's like, yeah, I can do this, but you know, remember, cross country in Oregon. And so I'm thinking, So you stop and you think, and you think, and you stop and you think. I called Lauren first. I said, I'm not telling you yes, no, or maybe. I said, this is a website I would like for you to look at. I want you and John to talk, and if it's something that you'd like to do, it's within reach. And I hung up and I called John. I said, John, I'm sending you a website. I want you to look at this. I said, I'm not telling you go, not go, anything like that. I said, I want you and Lauren to talk about it. If it's something you want to do, call me back. And I hung up. And I thought, oh gosh, you know, you cast it out into the wind and you hope. And with him to be gone for 8 weeks and not work when you're living in not the upper echelon of society is difficult. It's very difficult. And so for her to be willing to take 8 weeks of being alone and handling all of these things by yourself, I thought was very remarkable. But they called and they said they decided that it was a good idea and he wanted to come. But he wanted to come in September. This was July. I was like, okay, we'll do whatever. So I called and I said, can we come September? Everything's good, everything's set. And I'm just like, hallelujah. And then I'm on vacation. I'm enjoying the mountains of North Carolina. I'm in the whitewater, having a wonderful day. My phone rings. I'm like, oh no. And it was John. He said, I don't want to wait. He said, can I go today? I said, no, I don't think you can go today because you're in Oregon and Florida's cross country. And, you know, that plane ticket's not cheap on a good day. So it's like, you know, but it worked out. It's like you in July. He finished. The short of the story is he made it and he went to Golf Breeze. He knows Debbie. Of course, Debbie has been part of his life forever. It was really ironic because this was about the time Debbie was about to leave Golf Breeze to go back to Tampa. And I thought, wow, the universe is a powerful thing, powerful thing. So given his background, he had now, you know, from the time that we talked about earlier where he was tiny, he has been around the United States. I don't even know how many times he spent years just traveling and sightseeing and all these things. And he's decided Portland is his home and that's where he wants to be, which is wonderful. So I say that because he arrives at Golf Breeze with a backpack. 8 weeks we're going to be there, right? One backpack. Debbie called, she said, Joe, I got to tell you something. I said, oh no, here it starts. She said, he's just got a backpack. She said, I don't think there's anything in it. He kept asking me, based on that experience in Charleston with the chain link fence, he kept asking me, now you swear to me they don't lock the doors. And I said, John, I can't swear to you on anything. I said, I had him call Debbie. I said, they will tell you if they lock the doors. I promised. I said, this is not a trap. This is not a trick. It is what it is. And they're absolutely an open door place. If you want to come and stay for 10 minutes and leave, you're welcome. If you want to leave halfway through, you're welcome. But as a survivalist, he arrived with his hiking boots, his sweatshirt, what was it? I think a pair of pajama pants or something bizarre. No toiletries, you know, no undies, no, you know, all these things. And I'm like, So Debbie called me and she's like, I'm not sure what we do. I said, can anybody just go to Walmart? You know what I mean? Just like, but in his mind, he didn't know whether it was going to be a fright or a flight or a stay. You know what I mean? And so when you arrive, and he arrived and he was met as a guest at the airport and arrived at Golf Breeze as a guest instead of being asked if you were a boy or a girl, I think he softened instantly. You know what I mean? I think it took him a little time. He was very concerned, having gone through what we did at home for the detox. And he called and he said, man, it was fine. It's fine. You know, it's like, so, but it's been just a wonderful journey. He is now a year and a half, I guess, home with absolutely no interest whatsoever. I've asked him, he works in the restaurant business, and it's really ironic. I have one son that makes beer and one that makes pizza. And so in where he makes the pizza, they have a small brewery. So the beer is ample and flows freely, especially if you work there. And I said, is this a problem? I'm not sure it was a good job to take when we were talking about it. And he said, oh, no, that's not a problem at all. He said, absolutely. He said, I was locked in a room for 20 years, I guess. He said, I felt like it was pitch black with no windows, no doors, and no way out. He said, why would I want to go back there? So he's totally, there is no, I mean, there's not even a hesitation, you know what I mean there. And so it's and by the way, I should have prefaced this with this. I called and asked him if I could do this before I'm doing this, so please, you know. But he is a huge advocate for the three principles, and you have to know that he had sort of a hot temper at one point in his life. And he's now like, well, it's just my thinking, you know, that kind of stuff. It's like, and it's so comical because when we went to Gulf Breeze for graduation, we picked him up and he wanted sushi, so we went for sushi. But while they give you a little few minutes to sort of regroup and reacquaint and that kind of thing as you leave, he said, why didn't you tell me about this? I'm like, are you kidding? Are you friggin' kidding me? You know, 17 years I tried to tell him this story. When he got married and they were traveling, they were living in the truck and they were like a little bit button heads. It's like, you know, you guys are going to have to just stop and relax. And you're going to have to think of, you know, it's just your thinking, you know, the thought cycle, see the drawings, you know, the thought storm, you know, like anything you can think of, sending the books, you know, all these things. And he said, why didn't you tell me this? I'm like, good grief. Good grief. And so then when I explained to him that I had been telling him this for 17 years, he said, well, you must suck at it because I never did get it. So in wrapping this up so that other folks can talk and so forth, it's very, they also talked in there about Roger Mills and Roger Mills having a legacy. My greatest wish beyond hope has been answered. My brother-in-law died very young, and so I had John and Jeff, and then we got Christy and Stacy, which were my nieces. And all of the children have had issues. All, you know, not my 3 of the 4 kids have had issues. And at the time that one of the other members of the family was coming to Gulf Breeze, they were all sitting on the porch together, which was really, really a unique treat anyway. And the conversation was about the principles and how they felt like they needed to go forth. Just as everybody has said in this building, they were talking about how can we get this out to other people. And I thought, I just fell apart. I can't even talk about it. But I thought, this is it. This is what you worked for all those years. You know what I mean? Excuse me, I'm sorry. To be able to, excuse me, leave them something that it doesn't matter if I'm here or not here. It doesn't matter if anybody is here or not here. They have it, and they have it internalized. And then it's just like, shoo. So that's our story. It's kind of a long-winded one, but yikes. So I can't. I can't think of a bigger advocate than the Byer household. So it's like, if anybody has any questions or they're thinking, you know, they might want to go do something, it's like, just let us know. You know, we should be part of that staff down there. It's like, geez. You know, I have the one family member that went after John is now saying that it occurs to her she might like to live in Florida. It's like, you know what? I think it'd be awesome. You know, so are there any questions? I'm sorry. Anybody? Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
We just thought that it was awfully important to talk about addiction from a family standpoint too, because it isn't just a one-person issue. And families handle it in a lot of different ways. You know, we have some families that are very supportive, and we have some, we've had people come pick up their person, the guest that was there, and take them on an outing, and it's try to slip drugs or substances back into the center. So you never know how things are going to go. It's definitely an interesting journey, but to be able to see miracles happen, and you've already seen one and heard about another one, and you're going to get to meet another one. Are we going to have it? What's the time like today? Because I want you to have enough time to talk.
6:25.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was thinking. Okay, you probably got enough time. So will you come up and out?
It's me, I'm the miracle.
And before the miracle sits down, I want to say during that day where everybody was talking and everybody was on the porch, my family has the word Kent. I don't know if she knows that she's a hero in West Virginia. I'm saying.
I don't like being in front of people, which is really weird because it's like my job now to talk to people. So give me a moment to just sit with that feeling for a second. So in the addiction community, I feel like what I'm asked a lot first thing is what's your drug of choice? And I think the first thing that I remember in life that was that I would call my drug of choice, because it was the first thing that I looked at outside of myself to try to alter my internal experience, was validation from other people. I was a really bright child. I was reading the newspaper in my granddad's lap before I had the physical dexterity to turn the pages. And I had a wonderful, supportive, loving family, and they just, everything that I would do was just praised. And that, not to say there's anything wrong with that, but God, I loved it. I mean, it just made me feel whole and important and enough. And I went through life chasing that. And I was pretty good at it as a child. I was a really talented athlete. I made good grades. It didn't seem like a problem because I was getting what I needed. But I mean, it was like a drug because I needed more. And I needed to hear that I was okay from someone outside myself to feel like I was okay. When I was in middle school, I was about 11 or 12 years old, and my brother and I were like this. I mean, we were best friends, and he struggled with multiple mental health issues. But he pulled me aside and confessed to me. He said, I think about killing myself all the time, a lot. And I need you to swear that you won't tell anyone. But I really needed to get this off my chest. And so in my, and by the way, I cry a lot too. Don't think anything of it. It's just what I do. But he said, he swore me to secrecy. And so in my infinite wisdom at about 11 or 12, I said, well, if you kill yourself, I will kill myself, because I thought that would be enough. And it wasn't. Luckily, he was found in time and he was saved, but that was the first time that really kind of came to light for me as not only am I not enough, but other people are suffering from my not enoughness. I felt so responsible for his experience. As a matter of fact, the interesting thing when I found the 3 principles was I looked back in my history and I found that I had this pattern of feeling responsible for everyone's experience but my own. I thought that I could think you better. I thought I could think you different, but I didn't think that my thinking really had anything to do with my own experience. It's just interesting. In high school, I learned that being smart wasn't very cool. I felt really awkward. I actually ended up changing schools, went to a private school with more of an academic focus, and I thought, this is great, I'll reinvent myself. So I purposely answered questions wrong in class, and I pretended to be not as smart as I was, and I did not realize that everyone in this school was smart, and that was the cool thing to do, so I was now the dumb kid instead of the smart kid. And that was great news. Wow, never get that right. But I learned really quickly that if I went to a party and I drank, like that, I was cool. Like that was all it took at 13, 14 years old. And maybe that wasn't all it took, but I stopped caring at that point. So I felt cool because it was that same experience as when someone told me that I was enough, or I felt that they thought that I was enough. No longer did I care if he thought that I was enough. And it was that same sense of peace. My freshman year in high school, I met a senior boy, and we started this just silly high school relationship, but we thought it's forever and we are in love. And he went away to college in Michigan, and we were going to stay in touch, and we were going to keep this phone relationship. And he struggled with some mental health issues, and he really spiraled down fast. And it was a real downer for me, to be quite honest. And again, in my infinite wonderful decision-making skills, I decided that instead of telling him that I was not okay with the situation anymore, I would just do whatever I wanted and just kind of stop taking his calls as much, and I'd just let it fizzle out that way. And so he found out that I was, dating other people. And he called me from his dorm room in Michigan, and he put me on speakerphone while he slit his wrists, and he told me that it was all my fault. So once again, I felt that someone else's life and someone else's experience was in my control, and I wasn't doing it right. So I was about 15 years old, and I stayed up, and I had to look up the emergency numbers in Michigan and stay on the phone with them and get them to his dorm room. And they saved his life as well. He was institutionalized for quite some time, actually, after that. And I didn't realize it at the time, but my drinking really became pretty all-encompassing at that point, and I didn't know what I was seeking, but I just knew that when I was drinking, I felt better, and I knew that when people liked me, I felt better. When I felt that people liked me, I felt better. So I went to a party, and I was drinking as I did, and I dressed provocatively because that meant that boys would pay attention to me, and that was a really quick fix as well. And I flirted because people thought I was really great when I did that as well. It was really easy to get positive attention in that way. And I'll kind of spare the gory details, but I acted in ways that I wasn't proud of. But I was in a situation where I became unconscious due to my drinking, and I ended up being pretty violently raped in a social situation in a back room at a party at somebody's house, and there were multiple people involved, and I had to physically fight my way out. And the one thing that I remember about that, because none of the rest of it is really very clear in my memory, but the one thing that I remember is walking through the living room with all these people, trying to find my shoes and crying. And what I perceived was that everyone was just looking down and snickering at me, because everyone knows why girls come out of back rooms at parties. And once again, I felt like I had screwed up. All I wanted was for people to believe that I was okay so that I could believe that I was okay. And I just could not seem to get it right. Shortly after that, this well-meaning but horribly misguided guidance counselor in my little tiny school decided to stage an intervention for me and my drinking by selecting a group of girls in the high school that she decided were my friends, which was not true, and invited all these people into what was going on with me. And I was mortified. And I went home and I started drinking, and I called my brother, but I was unable to ask for help. So he answered, and he said, hey, I'm running out the door. I'm on my way out the door. Do you have any time? I don't really have time to talk. Do you need something? And I said, no. And I hung up because I couldn't say that I needed something. So I went downstairs and I took all the prescription medication I could find out of my dad's cabinet, and I took it all, and I drank everything that was in the house that was my dad's. And it was about a half hour later, and I laid down and got ready to die, and I called my brother because he had a landline. Nobody has those anymore, and a voicemail, and I wanted to leave him a voicemail and tell him goodbye. And I knew that he had just left the house. So I was leaving him this message on his answering machine, and he had left his wallet at home. So he walked in the door, heard the end of my message, picked up the phone and said, "Hey, I'm here, are you okay?" And I got terrified and I hung up. And within 5 minutes, I was on my way to the emergency room because he just came home at the perfect time. So my life sort of kept on in this really haphazard way. What was really interesting is that from the outside, it looked pretty okay because I did really well in school. I got a scholarship and went to college. Of course, I decided to bring with me to college this horribly toxic relationship, because if there's one thing I loved as much as drugs, it was people who I perceived were just a little bit worse off than me, so that I could just attach right onto them and feel a little bit better than. That was a huge thing outside that I used to feel enough. Look at me, I'm the responsible one in this relationship. I'm good for him, I'm the savior. So I packed up this man who was addicted to lots of things, and I went off to college and tried to make something of myself. And we just picked up worse and worse habits along the way. I did manage to graduate from college. I got a job in corporate healthcare right after graduation. And really quickly, it became evident that my career was going to get in the way of my using, because they just don't like it when you show up late and you take 2-hour lunches and you nod out at your desk. It's frowned upon. I had this one job where I actually had a door, and I would just sit there at my computer, passed out. And I had this really sharp sense of hearing, and I could hear that thing click. And if you've ever seen NCIS, where like their version of like what hacking and programming looks like, where they're sitting at the computer going, "I'm going as fast as I can't can't get into the mainframe." That's how I looked like when they opened the door. I just pop up and start going at the keyboard like a crazy person, like no one knew. And so I went through a few years of just outrunning consequences to the best of my ability. You know, I would get disciplinary warning after disciplinary warning, job after job, and right before I was about to get fired, I'd say, "You know, I think I'm going to move on to a different opportunity." And because it was about the job, right? It wasn't about me. And work was another huge thing that I used to feel okay about myself, because and this whole time, by the way, my using is progressing. So I'm still drinking every day, but I'm also using prescription pills, if anything I can get my hands on. Ecstasy, Molly, cocaine, meth, you name it. Just anything, mostly opiates though. And the way that I maintained my addiction was work. And so I went for a several-year period, not without just missing a day. I mean, I didn't miss a day of work, but I didn't miss a shift. I worked 14 shifts a week. If I did not work twice a day, then my world would fall apart, because I had to work in the evening to have the money to buy what I needed to get out of bed, to work in the morning to have the money to buy what I needed to get through my night at work, to have the money to do it all over again. And I typically juggled about 3 jobs at a time so that I could constantly be managing where I was on the schedule. And if, heaven forbid, I could not get a shift one day, I would show up at 5 a.m. with homeless people and illegal immigrants for day labor. And I dug fence post holes, and I riveted most of the numbers on Bridgestone Arena by hand. Hand riveters suck, by the way. But I did it because they would pay me at the end of the hours that I worked, and I could be well for that little bit of time because I did not have to sit with my feelings of inadequacy. And what was really interesting is that in looking back, even when I was physically sick, even when I was in active withdrawal, that was okay too, because it was a distraction from my feelings of inadequacy, because my primary sole focus was on obtaining the drug. And when I got the drug, it was okay for a little while, and then it wasn't. And then I got to focus on obtaining the drug again. And I did that for years and years and years, until my consequences started really catching up to me a little faster, and I decided I better do something. So I went and I checked into this treatment center, and you know, I didn't really want to do anything different, but I desperately wanted to do something different. I knew that what I was doing wasn't okay, but I wasn't really willing on any level to change. And I didn't really have any faith that there was anything different out there. I thought that it was either vacillate rapidly between being high and being sick and be miserable, or I could be clean and be socially acceptable and be miserable. And anytime I tried to get clean, and I would get this inkling of discomfort, like this feeling of discomfort would literally start to rise in me, and I would notice it, and I would go, oh my God, I'm uncomfortable. Oh my God, I'm uncomfortable. This isn't working. This isn't for me. And then I would focus on the discomfort, and it would just be, this is why I don't do this. I have to go use. Because I thought that discomfort was an indication that I wasn't doing it right. So I went to treatment. Again, glorious decision making. I met a boy in rehab. We fell in love in 12 days. It's magical. We snuck drugs in. We got high in treatment. We got kicked out. And we left like Bonnie and Clyde, middle fingers raised. And this is how romantic it was. I didn't have a dime to my name. And I had been dating this other guy who I actually still have an active restraining order against because I know how to pick them. And I called, and I was in this place way out in the country, and they didn't have taxis. And I got him to pay for a car service to come pick me up. So it was this like really obscenely flashy black Escalade with rims and tinted windows. And my old boyfriend had paid for it to come pick up me and the new boyfriend. And we literally stuck our fingers out the window with middle fingers to the treatment center. And we're off. But that was okay because it was all distraction. Like even when terrible things were going on around me and when I was creating all this chaos, I still didn't have to look at myself, so it was okay. What I thought at that time that was the worst thing that ever could have happened to me, because that guy used different drugs in new ways that I never thought possible and things that I never thought that I would do. And I now see that as the biggest blessing of my life. I think the universe had him in mind for me because it really brought me to a place of like any sense of identity that I was clinging on to and any sense of my ego. I put it in a needle. I did. Everything went downhill really quickly after that. I stole. I stole from my family. I stole from stores. I was shoplifting peanut butter because I thought that if I had a spoonful of peanut butter, that would be enough, that had enough calories in it to keep enough weight on me that people wouldn't notice. And I was stealing creatine, which is like to keep water weight on at Walgreens because I didn't have the energy to eat. I had blown out all usable veins in my arms, hands, feet. I was shooting cocaine, heroin, and crack in my neck. I was marked up from my earlobe all the way down my chest, down both arms. And I was also completely intertwined in this relationship too, because that was just as much of it was all just distraction in hindsight. It was all just, I was so drawn to the chaos because I didn't have to look at me when I was in the chaos. And I wasn't even a good drug addict, y'all. I was terrible at it. Like, that's why all this stuff was messed up, because I wasn't even good at it. So I needed the guy because he was able to help me use in the way that I now needed to use. And it was so sick. It was so sick because I worked and I bought everything and I would bring it back and I had to rely on him to administer it. And he had to use first because he had all the power. And then I would sit there sick and I would beg him and I would say, please, please, I know that you're feeling good right now and you don't want to be bothered with me, but like, I just need to be well. Like, will you please help me? And he would take what little we had left, already loaded up, into a needle and throw it in the toilet and say, you're such a junkie. This is all you care about, as he sat there high. And I'd get on my knees and I'd dig it out of the toilet and I'd say, "You're right, I'm worthless, I'm a junkie, will you please just help me, I need this." And I did that day in and day out. And I have this really specific memory. It was a couple weeks, well, so the first thing was I had this really traumatic overdose where I overdosed at work, and I was in an employee bathroom, and I was working in a bar at the time. And the bathroom was adjacent to the main dining room, and I was supposed to be behind the bar, and I was supposed to be serving people, and I snuck off, and I had gotten a bad bit of dope or something, but I immediately fell out in the middle of the room, and fortunately I was right down the street from the hospital. It took 2 doses of Narcan. I actually had the unique privilege of both being arrested and getting taken to the ER at the same time. They do that. They'll arrest you in the ambulance if they can get like a little electronic booking photo. And I remember waking up from the hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning and being discharged, and I was soaking wet where people had tried to revive me with water. My pants had been ripped seam to seam where they'd been just trying to shake me and wake me up before the paramedics had gotten there. My coat was still at work. It was January and there was snow on the ground, and I didn't have a single person in my life that I felt like I could call. I could have called my family, but then they would be disappointed in me, and that's what I lived my whole life trying to avoid. So I got out of the hospital soaking wet with ripped pants and snow on the ground, and I walked 3 miles home, and I thought to myself, this is it. Like, if you're not done after this, like, forget about it. You know what I mean? This has got to be it. And I woke up the next morning and I called my dope man, and I got on Google and I said, can I still get high after being Narcan? How long do I have to wait? And that went on a few more months. And I have this is like nothing happened, but I have this memory of my power had been shut off for about 6 months. I went through the whole winter with no power because it wasn't a priority. And I was truly living, like an animal. I was truly living like an animal. I didn't shower. I didn't feed myself. I lived in filth. And I had this tiny bit of dope left. It was this tiny bit. It would barely even be enough. And it was really late at night, and I couldn't sleep, and I was sick. But I knew I had to get up and work in the morning to get more dope. And I sat there, and I was trying to decide if I'd sleep tonight or if I'd make it through the morning. I had no power, so I had my cell phone that was about to die, and I was shining it, just looking at it. And like the misery of my situation dawned on me. And then the next thought that followed that was, this is terrible. You should be really upset about this. You should be sobbing right now. And I wasn't. I felt completely dead inside. I felt the inability to feel, which is interesting because it was what I had been seeking all along, and it scared the shit out of me when I noticed it. Pardon my language. It was, I would say, less than a week after that I had gone to some family function, and I had put on a ton of makeup and baggy sweater and all this, and I didn't fool anyone. And my mother had reached out and said, I don't know, I'm not going to say you're using, and she didn't really want to rock the boat, but she said, if you're not, something's bad wrong with your health, and don't let finances be an issue for you to not go to the doctor, because I was 40 pounds lighter than I am now, and I wasn't sleeping or bathing or taking care of my basic health. So I really just looked like a dead person. And I said, no, you're right. Like, you're right. And I'm ready, but I didn't feel worthy of her help. And I told her that. Because I thought that I didn't think that it would work. I didn't have any hope left. I didn't want her to get excited and me to screw it up. But I remember that feeling of not being able to feel. And I didn't find the principals. The principals found me because my mother chose the facility. I said, I'm just so tired. Like, I'll go wherever. I'll go. Whatever you think I should do, I'll do. And I'm very logical and very analytical. And we all okay with language? Because I said when I got there, what is this new age hippie bullshit? Like, what is it? But it was my last hope, so I had to kind of buy in or go back. But I remember my first session with a therapist, I said, listen, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to shoot you straight. I don't mean this in a good or bad way, but I think it's really going to maybe change the way that we work together. But I'm pretty sure I'm a sociopath. That was an actual conversation with Kate. And I, no judgment. I've accepted this, but I don't have the capacity to feel. And look at me, I've heard sobbing the whole time. But that's the thing, right? Like I never look back, because even when I feel anxiety or fear or discomfort, I'm so overjoyed that I have the ability to feel today. Like, it's so cool. It's really amazing. And when somebody was asking about the social drinking aspect, I can't speak to anyone else's experience, but we were just having this conversation last night, which is, I'm aware that my experience is moment to moment, and it's liable to change, and I can have a different thought at any moment. But if I had a written, notarized, stamped guarantee that said, you can go out and you can drink normally, and you can have some drinks and it will not escalate, I still wouldn't do it, because I would miss feeling stuff. Like, this is awesome. This is what it's about. Like, this is what... But what I was missing before is that I thought that when I felt stuff, it meant I wasn't okay. I thought it meant I wasn't doing something right. And all I ever wanted to do was to please and to do it right and to be okay. But I thought that I knew that I was okay because I saw that reflected in you. And really, it's like I feel like I spent my whole life looking in a series of those little fair mirrors that distort things. But I was looking at like one bouncing off the other, bouncing off the other, bouncing off the other, bouncing off the other, and trying to see what was on the other side and calling it reality. Like, I was using my thinking to think about what I thought that you were thinking about me, based on your limited perception of me, based on my limited perception of you, and on and on and on, and calling that my worth. And all I had to do was look back at myself the whole time, like, duh. It was too simple. But it's been so liberating. And I'm inclined to say, like, my life has been really charmed ever since, but the truth is it hasn't. I've buried people. I've lost friends. Most of the people that I knew are still out using. And some of them have died. And I have great compassion for that. And I can grieve really deeply for that. And what's weird too is there's people like I didn't even really know that I found that have died from this addiction. And I have just wept for days. And then there's people that have been really close to me and I felt nothing. But I don't judge my feelings anymore. It's just my process. You can't tell me how to do it. I can't do it wrong. And one thing about the trauma is that I really was able to kind of bastardize this whole thing of, not dredging up the past and it being about the present moment. And I thought, well, that's what I've been doing the whole time, because I really think that this sexual abuse really, I dissociated immediately. My mother immediately put me in trauma counseling, and that's when I first started getting hives with social anxiety. I would get hives the whole day before I had to go to the counselor, and I couldn't talk about it, and I put it down, and I didn't talk about it for years. And so I thought, well, that's what I've been doing. I've been leaving the past in the past. I'm doing it right? This is 3 principle stuff. But no, like, if I'm feeling it now, then it's my present experience, and I don't know. It's really liberating, because I just get to feel what I'm feeling and be okay with it, because it is okay. I don't know. I'm rambling at this point. I'm not even talking about addiction anymore. So yeah, I'm just going to say I'm done. Thanks. Do y'all have any questions? Oh yeah, I guess. All right. Okay, good. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
If you'd like to, is there anything you'd like to share about how your relationship with your family has changed?
Yeah. What's really interesting is I was always the sick one, and my family dynamic really worked around that. And it was kind of like, I think you were talking about with your son being your tennis ball. I was the tennis ball. And I stopped playing. I stopped playing the game. And everyone else was sort of forced to play a different game too. And it's been a little bit of a rearranging there. But what's interesting is I talk to my mom almost daily, and I'm the one that everybody calls for like life advice, which is really wild. And my sister actually said to me recently, because like I said, I just feel like I live this really charmed life. Somebody asked me, like, what are you doing these days? Like, right, and then the first 6 months or so I got out of treatment. And I said, when you're a little kid and you think about growing up and you're like, when I grow up, I'm going to be an adult. I'm just going to do whatever I want to do all the time. It's going to be awesome. And then you grow up and you've got all these responsibilities. I'm living the life that I thought I would live as an adult, as a kid. Just do what I want to do all the time. It's great. So my sister called me recently and said, how are you so lucky? So what's really interesting though is I sometimes we talk about, like, you and I have had this conversation that we see people just, banging their head against the wall over and over and never quite realizing that they're the one doing it. We wish you could just shake them and like give this understanding away. But like somebody said in one of the earlier breakouts, like your path is your path and you can't get it wrong. And what right do I have to rob someone of the experience that could lead to the desperation that brings them this gift of this understanding that I've gotten? Because I still look back and think that, putting a needle on my arm is the best thing that ever happened to me because it brought me here.
Yeah.
So, that's why I got to be so lucky. Really. You too can live this life. I'm not advocating that now. But yeah, no, my family dynamic has changed drastically and went from the sick one to the lucky one, which is weird.
I just have one comment. Our family dynamic was always very positive, even in the bad moments. But our family dynamic has changed, and he is kind of elevating, becoming the matriarch of the whole works, which I think is really kind of cool. And he handles it very well. It's a very well. So it's neat. And it's like you said, we talk every day, at least once, usually twice. So I love that. Yeah, he's either calling me or my husband. So it's good. Even he and his brother. So yeah.
Isn't it amazing to hear stories like these, to see where people can go to at their darkest, and then the help is still there. It's still inside. It's never destroyed. I never get tired of it.
And actually, if we have a couple more minutes, I left out the part we were talking about earlier. So the change in myself, so there's this obvious change of the fact that I don't shoot up drugs every day, which yahoo, that's great. But beyond that, like, there were all these other things that preceded the drugs. And I spent years like building up all these things that weren't really me. And you would not recognize me as I walked in, like the person that before I found all this. And I was just reminding Debbie that at my graduation from Gulf Breeze Recovery, she said, I remember when you walked in the door and I thought you had about a 3-word vocabulary and 2 of them were the F word. But I was disruptive, and I had a lot of 4-letter words in my repertoire. Apparently I still have a couple when I get nervous. I asked permission on one. One of them was an accident. But for the most part, I feel like I've just been shedding all these things that were never really me to begin with. And I look forward to where I'm going to be, a year from now, looking back on this and being like, oh, I'm so glad I could let that go. Because that's like, I don't know, it's just been this series of letting stuff go as I realize I don't need it anymore. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's not a question. I've been accused of having a firm grasp, which is very obvious. But in case there's any doubt, I just want to say that everybody who shared and when people share like this, it helps so much. And I'm so grateful and thankful for you to have the courage or whatever it takes to tell your story like this. And you know, it's helping people, and it will continue to help people in the future. And I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here doing it.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say that if any of you have people in your lives that are fighting addiction of any kind, just don't give up on them. Don't give up on them. They're not gone. And the behaviors that you might see are not who they are. It's just their way of coping in the moment that looks like it makes sense to them then. But don't give up. Where are we at with time?
1 minute till.
You can say another minute.
I don't know if I was like overstaying my.
So, because you said your family loves, so do you work at both?
Oh, yes, now I work there.
Okay.
I left that part out. So I am super blessed to just kind of continue in my understanding and then also get to see it fresh in other people.
When did you graduate?
August of last year. So I think I came into Yeah, I did an extra long stay though. I didn't ever want to leave. So I think I'm coming up on 18 months here soon.
And what better person to be able to share with anybody that, you know, people that call and they're afraid to come in and that kind of thing, to be able to talk to Kat and get that assurance. You know.
Absolutely.
Gulf Breeze is blessed to have her.
I'm blessed to have Gulf
Absolutely.
Breeze.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys, I guess enjoy your evening and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you all for your attention. If you have any questions, bring them with you in the morning.